Welcome, everyone, to a conversation between the legendary voice of Houston's performing arts, Bob Stevenson, and the creative team behind the Houston premiere of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical. And now our host, Bob Stevenson.
Well, hello and welcome to this podcast presented by the Texas Repertory Theater Company. I'm Bob Stevenson. With me in the studio are the founder and artistic director of Texas Rep, Steve Fenley.
Hi, Bob.
And the entire cast of Texas Repertory Theater Company's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical. We have Julia and Mark Leskowski, one of Greater Houston's first families of the theater.
Oh.
And
You're making me blush.
they are the folks you see on stage in performances of this show, which we're going to talk about for a few minutes and maybe even hear a few excerpts from. Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical, tells in words and music the story of Rosemary Clooney and the ups and downs of both her professional and her personal life. Mm-hmm. Steve, it's been called a jukebox chamber musical. You've referred to it as a play with music. Right. But as I look at the script, I see lots more music than I do play. Talk about the kind of unusual structure of this show.
One of the things I think that we discovered in rehearsal was, this is a show, there are so many scenes inside of songs. It is a book musical in the sense that there are scenes and then there are songs and the transitions between the two. But in this show, we found probably one of the most challenging things was you'll have a song and there'll be a musical break and there's a whole scene that plays inside of a song. And some songs, multiple scenes inside of a song. I think the reason that I said that I thought it was a play with music is because the music, there are great moments in the music, and of course Mark and Julia just interpret those so beautifully, but there's also serious issues brought up in the non-music sections of the play. This is a little different than a lot of jukebox musicals in the sense that they just don't wander out there and sing a cavalcade of hits and walk off.
Yes.
They get into some of the real biographical information on Rosemary Clooney. Mark in particular has a very challenging role in that he not only plays her psychiatrist, but also morphs into all the other men in her life. Jose Ferrer, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, even her.
And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes when we talk to Mark here. But
so it's far more complex than you would think of as a jukebox musical that's just a review of songs,
But even the dramatic scenes that you just referred to don't sort of play out as separate from the music is practically continuous through the whole show.
Yeah.
And the scenes don't play out as sort of these set pieces.
Right.
They're just little snippets of dialogue. It may be just each of the two characters saying one thing to another, and then you're into another song. You just get these little hints, and the story of Rosemary Clooney's life builds up out of these little tiny building blocks over the course of the show.
Yeah, one of our guiding principles in the rehearsal and in thinking about putting the show together was that this play really takes place in her mind. So you do see a little bit of a hallucinatory quality, and suddenly a character will appear, and they'll have an interaction and then disappear, and then she reflects on it. And so, we really tried to make this play take place in the inner space of what Rosemary was working her way through. And you're right, it flows, and of course Mark does such a beautiful job of transitioning in and out of all those characters and creating the impulses that she reacts to. And we wanted it to have a very inner space. I always said to Julia in rehearsal, this isn't reality, this is her memory of what it was.
Okay. As she's talking to her psychiatrist, Yeah, you figure out after a while that his questioning and his therapy with her is bringing up all these memories from her past of what has brought her to this point. You're right, it's her life, it's incidents of her life being recreated in her mind.
Well, and if you think about that, I mean, how do you remember things? Do you remember it exactly as it happened, or do you remember the way it made you feel and what it did to you psychologically, and what somebody said, the little catchphrase that sticks in your head? That's how you remember. And we tried to emphasize that in our staging and our production of the play.
Julia Laskowski, in a fictional play, everything you need to know about the character is there in the words. How is it different when you're putting on a play where the person you're depicting is a person who actually lived and you're telling their story? What do you have to do differently? You have some decisions you have to make going in about how you're going to portray this person who was a living, breathing human being.
That's a fantastic question. That's fantastic. So to me, it's challenging because, there's the Rosemary Clooney that everyone knows and loves and, really adores, the star. And then there's, in this play, she's very, very real and showing some incredible vulnerability. I was watching this morning an interview that she had after she had come through all the difficulty and had gotten healed from all the drug addiction and everything. And she said, you never knew who you were going to deal with when I was going through all that. I would be a sweetheart one minute and an absolute monster in the next breath. And so
she never knew who she was going to be.
Right, because once she would. So showing up as the adoring Rosemary Clooney that everyone knows and loves in the first song, is one thing, and then quickly launching into the therapy sessions with the doc in the next scene. So just really kind of trying to take the audience on this journey in a way that's not too jarring, but also really tells the story very truly, very openly, and makes it very authentic.
Well, and you've brought up an aspect of this particular character that I didn't allude to in my question, which is there was the public Rosemary Clooney, the persona that she put forth when she was on stage or on TV or in the movies. And then there was the real human being behind that whose life was way different than this sunny kind of carefree personality she had to put on in her public life.
She, very young, was abandoned by her mother.
Who took her brother Nick and moved from Maysville, Kentucky to Los Angeles.
Exactly, and started a whole new family with a man and left her and Betty. And so she and Betty...
Her sister.
Yes, bonded and became a singing sensation at 15 and 13 years old. And one thing that was really terrific for her was that once she realized that she could make money singing, she was like, okay, now I can maybe gather some control over my life, where before, she would be dumped off at a neighbor or a family member or whoever, and she had to put on that sweet demeanor so that they wouldn't be booted out, so that they had somewhere to live, she and Betty, and she looked after Betty and really, really kind of had to be an adult very young. So, I think maybe when she got a little bit older, she was happy to have a little bit of freedom to just not always have to be perfect. Yeah, so that probably kind of fed into some of the addictive aspects as well, I think.
Well, we're sitting here talking about this play, which has to do with the life and career of one of the major singers of the 20th century in American culture. I think we would be well to pause at this moment and hear an example of the music that she brought to the world and made famous forever through her performances. Hey There is one of her best-known hits, and we're going to hear it now as performed by Julia Laskowski in the role of Rosie, Rosemary Clooney, the girl singer, and the band from Texas Repertory Theater Company's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical. The song, Hey There.
solitary gloom, I call to myself. Hey there, you with the stars in your eyes. Love never made a fool of you. You used to be too wise. Hey there, you on that high flying cloud. Though he won't throw a crumb to you, you think someday he'll come to you. Better forget him, him with his nose in the air. He has you dancing on a string. Break it and he won't care. Will you take this advice I hand you like a mother? Or are you not seeing things too clear? Are you just too in love to hear? Is it all going in one ear and out the other? Hey there, you with the stars in your eyes. Love never made a fool of you. You used to be too wise. Will you take this advice I hand you like a mother? Or are you not seeing things too clear? Are you just too in love to hear? Is it all going in one ear and out the other?
From Texas Repertory Theater Company's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical, we heard the song Hey There, performed by Julia Laskowski in her role as Rosemary Clooney, and the Texas Repertory Theater Company band. Debbie Wiley is the pianist and musical director of this production. Andy Moritz is the bassist, and Luke Hubley is the drummer. Thank you for that beautiful rendition of that wonderful song, Julia.
Thank you.
Now, Julia, we were talking about your challenges in presenting a reasonably full and believable rendition of this person that some of us who are still coherent are old enough to remember, who actually lived and breathed. Mark Laskowski, you have an entirely different sphere of challenges as far as your role in this play. Your main character is the psychiatrist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, whom Rosemary Clooney did therapy with for 8 years after her breakdown.
Dr. Victor Monk.
Yes. But as Dr. Victor Monk, in the course of Rosie's bringing up all these memories from her past, you play every other character who walks through her mind.
Correct.
Which is at least 10 other people.
Exactly 10, yes.
Including her sister Betty.
Right, and her mother. Right. And in fact, in a couple of the musical numbers, you sing with As Betty, yes, correct.
her as Betty. Does that mean you have to sing everything?
It didn't call for it, but I found that it wasn't as difficult as it might seem. It helped my portrayal quite a bit.
In your role as a countertenor.
Yes, correct.
Mark's got a terrific falsetto, a terrific upper range.
Okay. Good thing. Since Rosemary Clooney did start out as half of a duo with her sister Betty for the first 3 or 4 years of her professional career, starting at age 15. Anyway, talk about what you had to do to keep all these people straight in your mind and to give each of them their own little personal identity?
As far as the work that I had to put into it, the one word that comes to mind is repetition. Is the more I do the show, because Julie and I will sit out in our backyard on our deck and we'll just run the show, and we did that on a daily basis before the run of the show, and a lot actually for the last 3 months of the lockdown. Which this show, I can't tell you how thankful I am to Steve and Tex Rep, and working with Julia on stage has been. It's the role that it's a dream role.
Wow.
And I get 10 of them.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been quite a year. We started this in December of 2019. Was when we first started pre-production on this, and once we got the lines down, we had the luxury of this being the longest rehearsed show I have ever done. So we had a lot of rehearsals where we just sat and talked. We didn't even run lines, or we just talked about the people that we were portraying, the moments in time that they came from. And I found that I just started talking, and it just came out. Once I got the order in my head, everything else just kind of fell into place, because Frank's always been a part of my life. So he's really easy to slip in and out of, just, put on that
Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, exactly. And Bing Crosby was probably my biggest challenge, as well as Jose Ferrer, just because I wasn't as familiar with them as I was with Frank Sinatra and some of the other characters I portray. So,
well, and that brings up the age-old question for all three of you. Do you create those characters on your own? Do you try to do an imitation of the real one, or somewhere in between?
It's really subtle, for me anyway, as far as, I mean, Rosemary Clooney is a great singer, but she didn't really have anything that was, I would say, like a benchmark quintessential sound to her voice. I mean, Frank, you put on New York accent, Bing, you do the blah, and you're there, So, yes, you have to do the research, but you have to pick up on it, on their character, without making them into a caricature.
I think that's one of the dangers.
Yeah.
One of the dangers is trying to do impersonations.
Yes.
That doesn't work. I had a great acting teacher that always said, quit thinking about playing a role and let the role play you. You're the instrument. Mark, in this instance, is the instrument, and every one of these characterizations has to come through him and has to be organic to him. I was lucky in the sense that Mark is very talented in terms of voices, and we just created a very specific kind of voice and physicality for each of those characters, and he slips in and out of them like a pro.
Because he is one.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
I'm getting paid for this?
Well, maybe not yet.
It's so funny.
Well, one of the duet songs that the two of you do together is How About You? And Mark, who are you? What character is singing this song?
Bing. This is Bing Crosby.
This is Bing Crosby.
Correct.
Singing with Rosemary Clooney. Okay, well, let's hear how that goes in the song How About You, from Texas Repertory Theater Company's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical, with Julia Laskowski as Rosemary Clooney and Mark Laskowski as Bing Crosby, and the song How About You?
So, Miss Clooney, would you like to sing a little ditty together?
Why, Mr. Crosby, it would be my pleasure.
You start, my dear.
When when a girl meets boy. Life is but a joy.
But the note they end on will depend on little pleasures they will share. So let us compare. I like New York in June. How about you?
I like a Gershwin tune. How about you?
I love a fireside when the storm is due.
I like potato chips, moonlight, and motor trips. How about you?
I'll get my hat. I'm mad about good books. Can't get my fill.
And Frank Sinatra's looks give me a thrill. Holding hands in the movie show when all the lights are low may not be new, but I like it. How about you? I like Jack Benny's jokes to a degree.
I love the common folks.
That includes me. I like to window shop on Fifth Avenue.
I like banana splits, late supper at the Ritz. How about you?
May I join you? That Marlon Brando smile makes me feel tall.
Helps you, huh? Well, Bob Hope now, he's more my style.
Really?
Pokey nose and all. This whole world's in a sorry way, that's what the papers say. It may be true,
long as those stars still shine.
long as your love is mine. I like it fine. How about you?
Long as you kiss so well.
Long as you cast that spell,
I think it's swell. How about you? Long as the birds still mate, may we reiterate, we think it's great. How about you?
One of the biggest song hits of the late Rosemary Clooney, How About You, performed by Julia Laskowski in the role of Rosemary Clooney, and Julia's husband Mark Laskowski in the role of Bing Crosby, doing the duet with her, accompanied by the Texas Repertory Theater Company Band from Texas Rep's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical. And we're talking with Texas Rep's founder and artistic director Steve Fenley, who directs this production, and Julia and Mark, who constitute the entire cast of the show. There's a theme running through this show, Julia and Mark and Steve. There are a couple of times when, in consultation with her shrink, Rosemary Clooney says something to the effect, I've spent my whole life trying to be what other people expected me to be or what they wanted me to be. And I thought, it's no wonder she kind of lost sight of who the heck she was. I'm not sure she ever knew. Let's talk about that.
Yes, she did. She tried so much to just be what everyone expected and to always be delightful. First, as a child, it was because it was a survival technique, to not be kicked out of the home that she and Betty were staying in, and then perhaps that kind of bled into her performance as well. She's like, well, this is working. People keep hiring me. I'm charming. I'm lovely. I'm, fantastic. And so later on, it seemed that, when she became the jazz singer, after she went through all that, she then was able to kind of just relax and be herself, finally, perhaps. She had a habit of kind of abandoning gentlemen that she would date, or I should say, as a youngster, because I think she was afraid of being abandoned, or, she was afraid of getting too attached. Because her heart had been broken.
As we mentioned before, her mom
exactly
took off.
Right. Her mom went to be a traveling saleswoman. And she
how
was
old was Rosie when her mom left,
Gosh. I believe it was 14.
It was right before she started working professionally. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so she kept saying, she said, I had to be strong. Did you cry? The therapist said, did you cry when she left? And she said, no, I had to be strong for Betty. I had to make all the decisions, good and bad.
Yeah.
So she grew up pretty fast, and I think she taught herself not to get too attached.
After her mom left, and she and her sister Betty were left there in Maysville, Kentucky with her dad, neither her biography in Wikipedia nor the play itself says much about what life was like with her dad. Now, I understand he was an alcoholic, and there are references to her grandmother cooking on the fireplace in their house for them because when there was no gas or electricity because there wasn't any money to pay the bills. And another reference, did her grandmother raise them, or?
You know, and to be fair, in the book, The Girl Singer, it talks about how the dad really was trying not to be an alcoholic. Like he apparently, like there's a line in the show where it says, well, one night Dad left to celebrate the end of World War II and took all the household money and never came back. But it was just brutal. Just brutal. But he, before then, had saved up a lot to try and support them. And then one night he just had a slip and just totally slipped far. But the grandmother, and apparently there were a lot of family members that they would bounce around between. And the grandmother was the most solid and loving and supportive of them. That was where she considered home.
Present.
And present.
Right.
Yes. Julia, you said something interesting about her, that she had trouble sort of letting go of relationships because she had this fear of being abandoned. I guess that played out most seriously in the fact that she and Jose Ferrer were married twice. It didn't work the first time, so they were apart for a few years and then got married again and were together again for another 3 years before they got divorced the second time. So that's one of the traumas that is clearly mentioned in the show, and which is played out.
Right. And she, before she married Jose Ferrer, she had a love affair with Dante DePaulo, who taught her how to dance. There's a joke about it in the play, but also I saw in interviews that she really was not a dancer. And so in White Christmas, Vera Ellen, her co-star, was a glorious dancer, but not a singer. And so they would have Vera Ellen do all these elaborate dance numbers, and they put her in that little cute number with the big fans because she could do that choreography. But later on, she fell in love with Dante DePaulo on Here Come the Girls, and she just left. They had this wonderful affair, and then she just left and didn't say goodbye because she wanted to be with Jose Ferrer. But luckily, later in life, they got married. They had their affair, their love affair. They lived together for 20 years, and then they finally married.
And they finally got married.
But she had a really hard time saying goodbye, and that she broke hearts a lot on the road.
Do you know the story about their reunion?
No.
As you said, she left Dante.
Right.
And years later, she was driving in Los Angeles and got stopped by a stoplight, and he pulled up in the car next to her.
Wow.
And they saw each other and recognized each other and were together from that moment on until the end of her life.
Oh, it's differently staged in the play, but yeah, there's no car, but but we have the same type of a reunion.
Yeah, given that part of her life was sort of a constructed rom-com.
Indeed.
This incident actually did happen in her real life.
Yes, yes.
So the structure of the play part of the Rosemary Clooney musical is that she's in therapy after having had a horrendous breakdown on stage in Reno, Nevada. And we'll talk about the reason why that happened or what triggered that in a few minutes. And she's reliving some of the more traumatic episodes in her life, which brings your character, Mark, in her psychiatrist, whom she consulted for 8 years as she went through therapy to try to overcome her problems. She had taken refuge in drugs, Seconal and Percodan and just about anything else she could get hold of. And the pills had taken over her life. Talk about that.
It's not a new story, or it's not one that hasn't been repeated multiple times. I mean, you have Judy Garland and a number of other studio system actors and actresses who were under so much pressure to perform and be camera ready all the time, or at least at a moment's notice. So a lot of them just fell into that trap and just saw no other way. That was the way that a lot of people did it. I know that she consulted a lot with Frank Sinatra, who had a lot to do with her getting clean toward the end. But of course, her breakdown was the ultimate push into the doctor's office that took her there.
Mm-hmm.
She voluntarily committed herself. However, it was necessary. I'm sure it was part of her contractual agreement that she do something.
I'm glad to hear that, because it's depicted in the play that Frank Sinatra was very activist in trying to get her to get help
Right.
for her drug problem.
Very much a father figure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Really?
that just jumped off the page to all three of us when we were
Yes.
working on it. And it was great because in the very first rehearsal, that first scene that we see with Frank and Rosie, that she always talked to him. She talked to him when she wouldn't talk to anybody else.
Interesting. It's good to know that some of these famous celebrities that she was involved with did have her best interests at heart. There's another scene in the play where she talks about this first time that Bing Crosby invited her to perform with him on one of his TV specials, I believe. And she's doing this Maysville, Kentucky girl thing. What the heck am I doing here? I'm on stage here with Bing Crosby, and he wants me to sing with him. So Bing and Frank, her buddies, really did mentor her.
Yes, indeed.
I think everybody recognized there was something very special about this woman and about her voice. And everybody recognized that. And, I mean, Frank says it to her. What do you say there, Mark? You say to her something about, it's going to hurt your voice.
Yeah.
It would be a shame.
Taking these pills is going to ruin your
Yeah,
voice.
it's gonna
Yes.
ruin your voice.
And it would be a shame to lose you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bing also has a lot of encouraging words as well. I mean, when they first meet, he tells her what a great singer he thinks that she is. And her starstruckness is quite palpable, at least in that scene.
She toured with Bing on, wasn't it his last national tour?
I believe so.
This was
yes.
later, much
Yes,
later,
yes,
of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't we hear another song?
Okay.
Let's do it.
We've had a couple of sweet ballads. How about let's do Sway this time?
All right.
And
Sounds good. Sounds good.
who's singing with?
Jose Ferrer.
Oh, hubby Jose is
Yes,
is
correct.
partnering with her
Correct.
on this particular song.
This was their second makeup scene in the show, I think. Sort of makeup. I you can call it makeup. It's
count
more,
the makeup scenes.
Yeah,
Yes. Right.
maybe it's more of a seduction scene than a makeup scene.
She says loving him was like a powerful drug, and he was.
She should know.
She's
Yeah.
that experienced.
All right. Julia Laskowski as Rosemary Clooney and Mark Laskowski as Rosie's once and again husband, Jose Ferrer, sing Sway from Texas Repertory Theater Company's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical.
Rosie, you don't really want that divorce, do you?
I'm not going to change my mind, Joe.
But think of our family, our children. I'm tired of living in that hotel.
I just don't know, Joe.
When marimba rhythms start to play, dance with me, make me sway. Like a lazy ocean hugs the shore, hold me close, sway me more.
Like a flower bending in the breeze, bend with me, sway with ease. When we dance, you have a way with me, stay with me, sway with me.
Other dancers may be on the floor, dear, but my eyes will see only you.
Do you mean it, Joe?
Only you have that magic technique. When we sway, I go weak.
I can hear the sound of violins long before it begins. Make me thrill as only you know how. Sway me smooth, sway me now. Other dancers may be on the floor, dear, but my eyes will see only you.
Mi amor.
Only you have that magic technique.
When we sway, I go weak.
I can hear the sound of violins long before it begins. Make me thrill as only you know how. Sway me smooth, sway me now. You know how.
Sway me smooth,
Sway me now.
you know how.
Sway me smooth. Sway me now.
From the Texas Repertory Theater Company's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical, we heard another of Rosemary Clooney's hit songs, Sway, as performed by Julia Laskowski in the role of Rosemary Clooney, and Mark Laskowski as Jose Ferrer, Rosemary Clooney's husband, who did perform with her from time to time, although I understand it was fairly reluctantly. Jose didn't consider himself a singer.
No. He was a classically trained actor, son of aristocrats, almost royalty, if not complete royalty. So, yeah.
And primarily an award-winning actor and director, not a singer.
Correct.
Yes.
Oscar winner. Did he ever win any Broadway awards?
Yeah, he won a Tony.
Did he win a Tony?
Mhm,
Yes.
For Cyrano.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was not a fan of singing along happy little tunes with his wife. Didn't really think of that as work. He did not.
And sang happy little tunes with some other people, too.
Well said.
They did.
It's interesting. I watched an interview that Rosemary Clooney did with Diane Sawyer in the late 80s. And Rosemary Clooney said infidelity in marriage was just totally non-acceptable to her, whereas it obviously was to Jose. And yet that didn't keep Rosemary from having had a little affair with Nelson Riddle.
That's correct.
In fact, apparently at some point she thought that she and Nelson might get married, although it didn't work out that way. In fact, there's this funny scene in the show where after Rosemary and Jose got divorced, Jose apparently married Nelson Riddle's secretary, and Nelson Riddle married Jose Ferrer's secretary.
Yes.
Yeah, go figure.
And Rosemary has a funny line, and I'm not going to spoil it any more than I already have by saying what her punchline is to that little incident.
Yeah.
You referred to this a while ago, Steve Fenley, the way the music and the drama of the play are integrated, and how the folks who created this show, and I'll look up their name in a minute, structured the show so that the music comments, or even in some places kind of advances the plot line of the show itself.
Well, it helps that the songwriting is so deep.
Yeah.
I mean, the lyrical content of these songs. I mean, I've told people, I mean, this is the golden era of American songwriting. You just don't see the kind of depth of lyric, and I told Mark and Julia, and I'll stand by this. I think the title song of this show may be the most beautiful love song ever written. I can't think of one that evokes the same kind of romanticism and imagery and beauty and lushness that this. I mean, so it's great that they had a songbook to work from that had such great lyrical content
and such depth.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the points in the show that really grabbed my heart is the end of Act One. The song is "Have I Stayed Too Long at the Fair?" Remind us, if you can, what it is that Rosemary Clooney is going through as she remembers her life incidents at the point where this song comes in and brings the curtain down on Act One of the show.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's probably my favorite song to sing because it is so chock full. I kind of feel like the concept of stayed too long at the fair, that concept, I have a couple of different meanings. And one is, have I stayed, trying to do this, performing track? Have I been, just doing this, being this star for too long? Is it my time over? And I also, staying too long at the fair is also... You know how being at a carnival, how you feel kind of like everything's heightened and kind of crazy, and all the sugary weird stuff that you eat and all the clowns. Yeah. I kind of feel like that's her drug addiction too. Have I stayed too long at the fair? Like, she's also thinking, is it time to end that? There's a lot of things that are kind of swimming around the concept for me of that particular song. And she also kind of threatens to quit therapy. Like, I don't need to keep coming to you, do I? So she, maybe I should just dive deeper into this.
Well,
addiction.
she and the psychiatrist have an out-and-out,
right,
very pointed confrontation at a certain point as to whether they should continue.
And so she's kind of wondering, should I just give in to this addiction, or should I, end it all? I mean, there's a lot going on with that song to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a terrific metaphor.
It is.
I mean, the metaphor of your struggle in life as some kind of a carnival. Yes. And you're throwing the balls and the things aren't knocking down, or you knock them down and they don't give you the stuffed animal, or you eat too much sugar and you throw up behind the, you know what I'm saying?
Too much,
Too fast.
Too much funnel cake.
Or the House of Mirrors, or the Freak Show, or all the other things. I mean, it's a fantastic metaphor.
It really is. It is. It's perfect. And then to have those scenes in the middle of the song, it's wild. It works.
It does.
It really does. It's very impactful.
So things built up in her life. As you said, Steve, she was living and working in the movies at the end of the great studio era, which meant she had to do what they told her. Mm-hmm. The A&R guys were still the ones who called the shots in the recording studio, so she was told mostly what she was going to record, as Mitch Miller did with that very first hit of hers. Life with Jose Ferrer was not all peaches and cream. Witness the fact that they got divorced and married twice.
With 5 kids.
And she had 5 children in 5 years. All the while trying to maintain her public persona and her career, doing the thing that she was obviously put on this planet to do. So it all builds up. She finds some relief or solace or escape in the many colored pills that she was taking at the time. But then there was an incident that she was involved with that just put her over the edge. And let's talk about what that incident was.
Yes, she started to help Bobby Kennedy with his campaign and got really close with the Kennedys and would go sailing with them and had a rapport and a friendship with them and so she was, present when he was assassinated, when he was killed.
She was there at the hotel in Los Angeles the night he was shot.
That's right, and her kids were there, and she talked about in the show. She talks about experiencing it, but she had a mental break right after that. She decided he wasn't dead. She so completely decided that he was not killed that she told Ethel Kennedy that he wasn't dead, and she told everybody that, and it really was not good.
And she was a month later. She was on stage at Harold's Club in Reno, Nevada, and broke down there in front of the audience.
Right.
Describe that scene.
Well, kind of like I was saying earlier about how 1 minute she'd be a sweetheart and the next minute she would just be, go off. She tells off the audience and just the break happens. And it's fueled by that song "Come On to My House," which she
the one
was
she
her
didn't
hit
want
song that she didn't want to record.
Didn't want to record way back a long time ago.
And she even argues with Mitch Miller on stage. She was there for a second, and anyway, so yeah, she sees a lot. And in that moment, she hallucinates her sister, her mother, her priest. And then she has these moments of clarity that, oh my God, I'm on stage. I should start singing. I'll sing a little, And then she goes back into her hallucination. It is really quite something. And I was petrified of doing that scene for quite a while. I kept putting it off. Poor Steve. I was like, can we not do that tonight? Oh, look how late it is. I don't think we have time to run that scene. But when we finally did, it was so satisfying because it just sort of, it all kind of brought all the pieces together that we'd been building up to that moment.
Yeah, we were both afraid of that scene. I don't have many sequences of theater that I read and I go, gosh, I have no clue how that's going to work. And that was one of them. I just didn't know. And we got in a room, and when we finally started pounding at it, we just figured out where the pieces fit. And I remember that rehearsal. And Mark was great because, Mark's kind of sitting over in the corner watching Julia sweat bullets, at this number. And he would always have something insightful to say and a good reaction. And we just assembled the pieces. And at the end of that night, we looked at each other and went, wow, we figured out how this is supposed to work. Yeah. We figured it out together. Very satisfying evening in the theater. And quite honestly, it lands on the audience like a ton of bricks. I mean, they just really respond to that sequence of the play. You can hear a pin drop at the end of that.
True. It's really quite astounding to watch her go through that every night at the performance. Keeping it together through this show is very difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, not only do I have to remember who the heck I am at that particular moment, but I also have to remember that this isn't my life, or this isn't really me. Yeah. Mark actually has a sequence at the end of that where he comes on as the psychiatrist and sits and listens to the end of this.
Oh.
And the song and scene devolve into her alone in an empty theater screaming for help, and then the lights just come up and Mark says, I'm right here. And it's just, once again, it just hits the audience in the forehead like a brick. It's just a fantastic sequence, and that's the moment where the play turns and now we watch her ascend out of this, right? And that's a glorious thing to watch because anybody can relate to that. We've all had those moments. Those dark moments when we thought, oh, this is never going to work. And then here we come. We rise like the phoenix. And we get our second.
She did.
Yep. Yes.
And like Rosemary says in her final monologue of the show, life has a flip side.
Yes. And you helped helped me find my flip side, yeah. Well, Julia, you and Steve have both used the word satisfying to describe how it felt to finally work out that scene, but how draining is it for you emotionally? Because you've still got several more scenes and songs to do after that moment in the show. You've got to keep some reserve there.
Well, and 30 seconds later, I have to kind of perk up and be, do Mambo Italiano.
Yes.
Wake up, okay. And I was afraid. I really was so afraid. I was like, wow. Because, I mean, after rehearsal, you know, the car ride home together, it's an hour drive, and we were like, oh. But I don't know. It just kind of works, and it's incredible to just sort of experience that and to let it kind of flow through, and then to go on to the next thing. I don't know. I mean, Steve, if it weren't for your kindness and your wonderful direction, I wouldn't have had the courage to do it. I kept telling Steve, I'm a singer. I'm not an actor. I don't know what I'm doing. I know. It has been a while since I had to do anything that intense. So it really, it just worked. It just worked.
Well, part of it is we spent a lot of time talking about it.
We did.
And just talking about how do you trust yourself that you can go somewhere like that and then leave it and get out and come back. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to trust that you can do that. Otherwise, you know, acting becomes a psychological trap. And of course we know that that's happened to people. I mean, there's some pretty famous examples of people that could not get back out. But you know, she was really brave, and she really trusted me in rehearsal that I wasn't going to let her go too far astray, and wasn't going to go wrong. And she does a lovely job of it. I mean, she goes where she needs to go. And then when the number's over, when she comes out, she really comes out. It's honest both ways, in and out. And that's the secret.
Mm-hmm. She had her breakdown in 1968, of course. That's when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. And she was in therapy for 8 years after that. But she did get her act together. There's a brief reference at the end of the play to her performing at the Hollywood Bowl and performed before full houses again after that. And starting, was it 1977, she had an arrangement with the Concord Jazz record label in California that she put out a jazz album every year from 1977 until her death in 2002. So she had this whole new career as a jazz singer, which is beyond the pale of this particular production, which kind of ends with her triumphant comeback at the Hollywood Bowl. But she must have had a certain amount of satisfaction, to use that word again, that she had come back and was doing again what she was meant to do.
Well, she talks in the show about being a has-been. And then at the end, there's another 20 records. There's another 20 albums coming from this woman.
Yes.
That's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And appearances on TV and live concerts and all that.
She said she never considered herself a jazz singer, but she got such rave reviews from people that really felt that she just really embodied the style well. So
I think her last recording that made the top 40 Billboard chart was a number she did with the Benny Goodman Trio. So she did okay as a jazz singer. Steve, you said before that the song whose title was borrowed for this particular stage production is one of the most beautiful love songs, most romantic love songs ever. So we would be remiss if we did not hear it before we conclude our festivities here. The song is Tenderly, performed here in the role of Rosemary Clooney by Julia Laskowski.
And I would say this is a jazz song. I mean, this is not a pop song. This is a jazz song.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And-
the changes are very
So,
much jazz.
so if there was ever any doubt that she was going to handle that style, this recording would have put that to bed.
Julia Laskowski as Rosemary Clooney sings tenderly.
Mitch Miller once described love as the only way you hear it in American love songs. I love, you love, we love. How much do we love? Why do we love? And why did you stop loving me? I think I had them all with Joe. The evening breeze embraced the trees tenderly. The trembling trees embraced the breeze tenderly. Then you and I came wandering by and lost in a sigh were we. The shore was kissed by sea and mist tenderly. I can't forget how two hearts met breathlessly. Your arms opened wide and closed me inside. You took my lips, you took my love so tenderly.
Rosie, you've been waiting so patiently. It won't be long now until Phyllis gives me that divorce.
I know, Joe. It's all right. We're together.
I want you to know how I feel about you. And this is for you.
Oh, Joe, it's beautiful. So beautiful.
Look what it says inside. Te amo. I love you.
The shore was kissed by sea and mist tenderly. I can't forget how two hearts met breathlessly. Your arms opened wide and closed me inside. You took my lips, you took my love so tenderly.
From the Texas Repertory Theater Company's production of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical, we heard Julia Laskowski as Rosemary Clooney singing one of Miss Clooney's most famous hit songs, Tenderly, the one that gave its name to the show itself. The Texas Repertory Theater Company band accompanying Julia in that performance was Debbie Wiley, pianist and musical director, Andy Moritz, bass, and Luke Hubley on drums. We've been talking with Steve Fenley, the founder, artistic director of Texas Repertory Theater Company, and the stage director of this particular production, and the entire cast of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical. Julia Laskowski, who plays Rosemary Clooney in the show, and her husband, Mark Laskowski, who plays everybody else who appears on stage.
Everybody else.
And a few that don't. About this wonderful show about this extraordinary singer whose life was so hard, but who made life so much easier for everybody else with her wonderful music. We look forward to further performances of the show from Texas Rep. And until then, we thank you for listening. I'm Bob Stevenson. The show, Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical, was written by Janet Yates Vogt and Mark Friedman. And we hope you catch a performance of it one of these days very soon. I'm Bob Stevenson.